All right, so today we're diving deep into Fortnite Chapter 5, Season 4 duos, and let me tell you, the source you sent over has some really interesting stuff about strategizing, going way beyond just landing your shots. Expert speaker, what's the edge we're looking for in this deep dive?
So this source is all about, really squeezing the most out of this season's unique stuff. And there's a lot. We're talking new spots on the map, those crazy Marvel power-ups, even how the story itself plays into winning. It's wild.
Speaking of new locations, the source mentions Castle Doom and Doomstadt. Just those names, right? Kind of intimidating. I was like, the places to land now, even if it means, probably fighting right away.
It's funny you say that because the source actually plays on that whole vibe. High risk, high reward for sure. They're big in the story, which usually means better loot, but also everyone in their duo is going to be dropping there. Land early, maybe get some crazy powerful weapons right off the bat, but be ready to fight for them,
So for players who like to be a bit more strategic, loot up a bit before jumping into the chaos, are Freaky Fields and Brawler's Patch the places to go this season?
You got it. This source is big on strategy, knowing your playstyle. Those two spots, those are your slower burn starts. You and your duo can gear up, get a feel for the map, maybe even practice some builds before things get hectic. A well-equipped team working together, that's dangerous, even if they weren't the first ones brawling.
Okay, gotta ask about the Marvel stuff this season. The source mentions Gwenpool and War Machine. What kind of crazy abilities are we talking about?
Oh man, the mythic abilities are back, and they change everything, not just like stat boosts or whatever. These are game changers. Imagine using Gwenpool's hacking to turn your opponent's traps against them, or like soaring above everyone with War Machine's jets. Just two examples, the source doesn't even list them all, but you can see how they add this whole other level to fights.
And from the sounds of it, knowing how to fight against those powers is just as important as using them.
100%. This season isn't just about mastering the new stuff, it's knowing how to counter it. Like if your opponent has those War Machine jets, you don't want to challenge them to a long-range fight out in the open. Gotta adapt, maybe try to draw them to close quarters, coordinate a surprise attack with your duo. Thinking ahead is key.
Now, one thing that stood out in the source was this emphasis on finding epic or better weapons, ASAP. Is that the biggest early game shift this season?
It kind of tells you how the whole game's gonna go. Points to a much faster meta where those early fights are even more important. Just picture everyone going for those legendary weapons right when they land. Getting those high-tier weapons early on could be the difference between totally dominating the mid-game or getting taken out right after you land.
Which brings us to something else the source mentions. Doom chests. Just the name, right? I'm already getting high risk, high reward vibes. What's the strategy with those?
Think of Doom chests as like another layer of strategy when you're looting up, but with that extra risk. The source really hammers home that where you find certain weapons matters this season. So say you're in Doom's courtyard, more closed off, right? You're going to want those close-range weapons they talk about. But out in the open, like on the raft, a good sniper rifle from a Doom chest could be what gives you the edge. It's all about adapting to the environment, even when you're looting.
Knowing the right loadout for each spot is definitely key, but this season seems really big on teamwork. What are some of those next-level duo strategies you think are going to be essential?
Oh, yeah. Knowing your loadout is huge. But this season, teamwork. It's like next level. It's not just about sticking together. This source makes it clear that synergy, like really working as a unit, that's where it's at. Like they specifically talk about coordinating those mythic powers.
Right. Because if you've got one person flying around with those War Machine jets and the other one's using Gwenpool's thing to mess with enemy traps, man, the plays you could pull off if you're in sync.
Exactly. And reviving. Don't even get me started on reviving. This isn't just about getting your buddy back in the game. It's about when and where you do it. Revive out in the open. You're both sitting ducks. Find cover. Coordinate your moves. That's how you turn getting knocked down into a comeback story.
So basically, with all these crazy hot drop zones and everything, communication is even more crucial this season if you don't want to get wiped right off the bat.
No doubt. The source is all over that fast-paced action, especially those early game zones, like Castle Doom. One missed call out could be the difference between walking away with all the best loot and getting sent straight back to the lobby.
For sure. You and your partner got to be each other's eyes and ears out there.
Yeah.
Enemies, weapons, what's the plan?
Exactly. That level of communication, it's not just helpful, it's essential if you want to survive.
Now, this is interesting. The source mentions the storyline quests being important for duos, too. How does that even work? I thought those were totally separate.
See, that's what's cool. It's like this season blurs the lines between the story stuff and the actual gameplay. Don't think of those quests as side missions. Think of them as opportunities.
Okay, I'm listening. What kind of opportunities are we talking here?
Well, they hint at maybe getting a unique weapon by finishing that Shuri's Invention questline, or even finding a hidden spot that gives you an advantage through the illusionist. You know, those little edges that can add up, especially if you're up against duos who are just focused on racking up kills.
So Doombots, Shuri's inventions. Sounds like we got to actually pay attention to what's going on in the story this time.
Exactly. Think of it like this. The more you know about the lore, the more you know about the game itself. Take those Doombots, for example.
Yeah, those don't sound like your average AI enemies.
Right. It's not just about blasting them away. It's knowing how they act, how to use that to your advantage, even using them as a distraction while you reposition or heal up.
So it's not just about going in guns blazing this season. It's about strategy.
It's about the bigger picture.
And speaking of the bigger picture, the source hints at some pretty intense endgame situations. Environmental stuff, those AI enemies. Is this where knowing the map like the back of your hand really matters?
Oh, absolutely. It's like everything we've talked about, right? The mythic abilities, the Doombots, even maybe Dr. Doom himself. Imagine all that coming into play in those final circles. This source makes it seem like those endgames are going to be way more unpredictable this season.
Yeah, suddenly just knowing where to find good loot doesn't seem like enough to win.
Exactly. You and your duo might have to deal with a bunch of Doombots and other players at the same time. They even hint that Dr. Doom could be like a final boss. Talk about pressure.
Whoa, intense. Oh, and those rift recalibrators, the source mentioned those too. Those are back this season, right?
Yeah, they are. And they're super strategic, especially towards the end. Remember that storm's always closing in? Rift recalibrators give you that mobility you need, but it's more than just escaping.
Right. I bet you could use them to really turn things around.
Totally. Say you're pinned down, storm's on your tail, but you snag a rift recalibrators. Boom. Suddenly you're not just running, you're choosing your next move. You could even flank those other duos who thought they had you trapped. It's all about thinking a few steps ahead, even when things are crazy.
This has been amazing. Seriously. Our listeners are going to be strategizing like pros after this. One last thing from the source. All the updates and hot fixes, those always shake things up. They even call out specific ones like V31.30 and V31.40. Or should we be reading every single patch note?
You know what they say? Knowledge is power. Especially in a game that's always changing like Fortnite is. A new patch could mean a whole new weapon everyone's using, or they might rebalance the old ones. Even those mythic abilities could change. Staying on top of the updates, it's not just for the hardcore players anymore. It's how you stay ahead of the game. What you learn from those notes could be the difference between winning it all and, well, not.
Makes sense. So to wrap things up, it sounds like this season is all about strategy. Knowing the map, your loadout, your partner, and staying informed about all the changes.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's going to be a wild ride.
That's for sure. Huge thanks to expert speaker for breaking it all down. And listener, you provided some really interesting intel this time. Now go out there and get those victory royales.
Good luck out there. And remember, the best players are always learning and adapting. Find what works for you and your duo partner.